3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Welcome to the Ketamine StartUp Podcast. This is the first go-to podcast for insights on launching and marketing ketamine infusion clinics. In today's episode, I am so thrilled to share my conversation with Dr. Joe Tafur. He's an integrative family physician, curandero, author, and speaker. We dive deep into the fascinating intersection of modern and traditional healing practices, spotlighting the role of psychedelic therapy, including ketamine and ayahuasca for mental health treatments. Dr. Joe Tafur shares insights into the unique challenges and skepticism from the medical community towards psychedelic medicine, while highlighting its profound potential for addressing complex psychological and spiritual ailments. We dive into the critical role of spirituality in the healing process and the growing acceptance of these non-ordinary states of consciousness in contemporary medical therapy. We also get a glimpse into Dr. Joe's personal journey, as well as his upcoming projects. Of note, he has a book coming out. It's called The Medicine Song, which dives deeper into his connection with spirituality and healing. So let's get started and explore these enlightening, mind-expanding perspectives with Dr. Joe Tafur. Welcome to the Ketamine StartUp Podcast. So excited you are here. We have a very special guest here today, Dr. Joe Tafur, who I have personally known for over a decade now. And it is really an honor and pleasure to have Joe on the podcast today. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Great to be here.
You're welcome. And for those listeners and viewers who may not know who you are, tell us, who are you?
Who am I? I am Joe Tafur. I'm a family physician that has also gone through integrative medicine training. And so I'm a medical doctor, and I'm also somebody that has gone deep into traditional Amazonian plant medicine from Peru and studied to working with ayahuasca ceremony, a traditional way to become ayahuasquero to help run ceremony. And I'm also an author, and I have a book, and I speak about it and teach about it. So I think that's what I do. I'm a Colombian American guy that lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and has been traveling a lot in different places in the world.
Thank you for that background. And what's really fascinating for me is, I believe in 2011, so that's 13, 14 years ago now, you took a bit of in a way, a pretty big leap and left turn when you started up your healing center in Peru. So tell us about how you made that decision, because we're in traditional medicine. We have regular routine careers. It can be a very stable path, whether it's family medicine, emergency medicine, anesthesia, et cetera. Like, for someone to take a leap and do something different takes a lot of courage. So tell us how you made that leap for yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Yeah, I don't know. It was just really a calling. I felt like I was, at that point in my career, I was finished my residency in family medicine. I was interested in integrative medicine and getting connected. I started doing research at UCSD and was doing some part-time doctoring and part-time research. And then somewhere in there, I went down to try to go through ayahuasca ceremony with Shipibo healers in Peru. And I had a major experience that was like, I already had this kind of nagging curiosity about that from my prior experiences of peyote ceremony in Arizona, which I went to for personal healing when I really found some very deeply moving healing experiences that were very important to me at that time. And then I also got exposed to the culture, the spiritual healing culture of some of these indigenous traditions, and the actual, how would they work with such a medicine in some kind of ceremony? How would they work with people? And I was very fascinated by that. Just really was something that I was blown away by, that really resonated with me. I just felt like there's something familiar about this for me. And so that was just digging around in my head. And so when I had the opportunity to go to Peru and experience ayahuasca ceremony with people healers, and I had a major experience of feeling like a sense of belonging. And that was like 2007. So then I said, wow, I don't know what happened. I know I want to try it again. I want to go back. I went back, deeper experiences, more fascinating. And then as a doctor, seeing the kind of healing that was going on, I was very impressed and surprised to see these people, Western people, responding so much to what these people were doing. And so then I had a friend that I thought, I'll bring this friend of mine down. I thought he would be somebody that I'd want to take down there, a guy with ulcerative colitis. And he had a big response in a short period of time. And then I was just getting to know the healers. As a Colombian American person, I spoke Spanish, and I was getting to know. They said, "Hey, you start bringing people down here, you could stay for free. Come, start bringing people down." And so I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that. Actually, I'd like to be part of that." And then in bringing a group, then I got involved with the team. Then Ricardo, who was one of the healers there at that time, was starting to really integrate me into what we were doing with them. And I started getting exposed to that. And we became friends and kept coming back. I brought us another group of people. And then later I just came on my own, and I just kept wanting to come back. I thought, maybe when is this going to be over? I don't know if I'm going to stop doing this. At some point, where is this going? And then Ricardo invited me to help join him to help start that center with Ricardo, a Marengo Peruvian indigenous healer, and Sveta Mamic, who was a Canadian artist and healer. And it just, I don't know, it wasn't really so much of an act. There was courageous moments in it, but I didn't have the kind of, my student loans were not at the same level as a lot of my friends. I didn't have that load to worry about. I could manage it with what I was doing, what I was making. And so it just was like, when he told me that, do you want to help? I was just like, yes, that is what I want to do. Yes, it was a very straightforward yes in my mind. But at that time, there were 6 people that were going to be partners, that were going to all come for a month a year or something like that, or maybe 2 months a year. And it didn't shrink down. And some people fell away, and it started changing. What was going to be like, to buy the property, to like take this leap, it was $600 a piece to put the $600 down. It's like, is this really going to work? And then that was probably in July. And then I went down in December to see what Ricardo was doing, because he had asked for more money. So I need some more money because we're building the Maloca and this and that. And I took a chance on that, sending up some now in the thousands. And I went down, and they had built it. He was very serious and very professional about that. And he was like, yeah, we're going to get started soon. And then the other people had dropped out, and it was just Ricardo and I. And he was dead serious about making it happen and doing it. And so it just took on a life of its own, because now I had invested into this thing. And so I came down for several months the first time. And then now we're running it. This is our business. This is what we're doing. And so it just took off on its own. And so I don't know, the courage, is to show up every day and do it. It's hard work. But it was just interesting, fun, like this. I don't know. It's what I wanted to do, actually.
Yeah, it sounds very organic in a way, in the way it grew, and just the way that certain partners needed to be pruned, and then certain people were more resilient and connected. I'm curious. So this is back in 2006, 2007, and now we have this whole quote, psychedelic renaissance or resurgence, where the last psychedelic science conference in Denver, I think there was 10,000 people. But many years ago, it was not like that. So some people were, when you were first starting this and you're leading groups and opening it up, did you face criticism from your medical colleagues? Hey, man, what are you doing? This is really out there. And how did you deal with that? Or if that was even a focus for you?
Yeah, I was keeping it a low profile in a strange way. When New Era started, I had started working per diem in Arizona in primary care. Then I was working primarily for Cigna, which is a big HMO here, that there was always, it's so big and they always had the openings. So I could get these per diem gigs for 2 months or 3 months or 4 months and work these jobs. And then Anyway Rao was putting up our first website. It was just us making a website. And I was downplaying, like the ayahuasca ceremony is definitely one of the things that people came to Niue Rao for, maybe a primary reason that people would want to go and experience that. But I didn't put it on the website at all because I was embarrassed or ashamed and didn't want to. We offered a lot of it. To me, it was deeper than that, what we were doing. And there's the diet and the plants, and there's all these other things. Yes, the ayahuasca is central to what we're working with, but I was concerned about the stigma of that. And so that was like the big reality check of that was like, okay, you have a center where you're trying to let people know internationally that this is a place you can go. And so then the search engine optimization and all that kind of stuff to make it like clear to people that they could find you. And I didn't put it there because I was worried about that. And then when I was working at the clinic, I didn't tell, which is how I'm going to Peru. I just kept it quiet for a while. And that was 2011. By the time 2013 hit, I got invited to speak at the MAPS conference then, just as a point of reference, there was like 1,200 people there, or even less. It was like, so you're talking about an order of magnitude change. But it was like, that was a conference. It was just a kind of a normal conference. Being told, I don't know how many people were actually there, but they report that many people participating somehow. And so it was much smaller. Seeing it was like, there was support there. You could tell that there was support. There were studies, there was research, there was CME credit being offered at the MAPS conference. So then that opened my eyes to the psychedelic renaissance. I was like, okay, this is happening back home. And people are seeing, and then I was seeing the kind of results I was seeing down in Peru. So for me, it was like, as a doctor who cares about patient wellness, it was like, you can't argue with that. And the colleagues that would have become aware at my job in Arizona, the clinic, once they saw that I was carrying my weight at the clinic, okay, he's handling his doctoring is helpful. It helps to have him around. Okay, we're a team. It's working. So they respect you as a colleague. And then you tell them, hey, we're helping people down there. And so they already know, okay, this guy, we know how he works. And so then to hear that is they were more curious, So that's what I found. I didn't find a lot of resistance. I found a lot of curiosity. And in a large part, maybe because I was working in that field alongside these people.
Yeah. So it sounds like when your medical colleagues were working with you, they're like, hey, this guy's legitimate. He's a good physician. He knows what he's saying. He's a team player. So you weren't doing some wacky, regular allopathic medicine. You were actually doing the right thing there. So it gave you more credibility in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember for me, when I was opening up the ketamine clinic, this is in 2016, 2017, where I was just thinking about it. And I was telling my colleagues in the ER, hey, I want to open this up. Like, they would make fun of me. Been a mild mannered, ketamine co, he's giving more ketamine in the ER. So I did notice that there was resistance from some of my colleagues, but there was a little bit of a challenge there.
Sure.
But now with the data, it's, hey, and you had mentioned you saw the results physically.
Yeah.
That's proof in the pudding.
Yeah. It's proof in the pudding. So then it's ignorance is what you're dealing with. And so like people that want to put an extra layer on their ignorance of, I don't know, making fun of somebody or maligning them, or that's just, what are you doing? Apparently you don't know. It can just poke fun. It's like with your old colleagues, and that can be fun. And then it can be hurtful when you're really trying to do something that's meaningful to you. But at the end of the day, that's what's driving the boat. And that's why I said these other colleagues who are like, I felt like they were just more down to earth people, some of the people I was working with. And they're like, wow, they wanted to hear about, oh, you guys can help somebody with that. Oh, how'd you do that? And so I think that's ultimately what drives the thing. That's what drives medical care. You have all the resistance, all the different forces, all the mindsets, all the profit margins and all those players, but the marketplace is going to, at least it's going to be a major influence, maybe not the only influence at all. Of course it's not, but it will be a major influence is results. And so that's what it is. And so if you are bringing results, and if you're not, you're going to have to catch up. No matter how much you make fun of the other people or try to make your case, eventually you don't take your car to the place that doesn't know how to fix the car just because they have the cocky attitude. Maybe for a while you might do it, but not over and over again. No, you won't.
Yeah, good point. The results do matter. And it's really amazing because I feel like you're a pioneer in this space. And as a result, you literally wrote a book. I've actually read it 2 times. It's called Fellowship of the River. So literally, this was Joe's fellowship that he did on the river and sharing a lot of patient experiences and stories, as well as personal stories. So I highly recommend that the listeners and viewers please buy the book and read it because it's very insightful. I do want to fast forward because you're actually working not only with ayahuasca, but also with ketamine therapy. So tell us about how you transitioned and incorporated that into your practice.
Yeah, I've been spending more time in the States. Like as of about 2017, I stepped away from being a primary business partner at Niue Rao in Peru. So I spent more time. I put out my book and I was like interested in sharing about what I had learned, spending more time out of the jungle. And, that I got exposed, and I'm back at the MAPS conference, getting exposed to the new update of what's going on in psychedelics and seeing getting connected to the MDMA research people, being part of and then we started our research project, our epigenetics research project with the MAPS study to get saliva swabs on people going through the MAPS MDMA trial. So I was getting more and more exposed to and connected to the MAPS MDMA therapists in the different centers because there are multiple centers across the country, and seeing that a number of them, and getting to know them and talking to them, that they were seeing that these big results that they were having in the psychedelic psychotherapy intervention, this technique that they were developing of doing therapy with their thing was very focused on therapy catalyzed by the MDMA. And seeing that they were trapped in the study protocol and that they had to then they had to sit through the placebo. That's half of what they have to do to be part of this project and to help bring this change. And they're getting frustrated. They want to practice what they've been learning. And they started talking about, with ketamine, you could use that they found they had similar kind of possibilities of bringing ketamine into their therapy protocols that they were doing. And so that was the first time I got exposed to that. I had heard when I was at UCSD in the hospice, rotation, when I was a medical student, even back then, in early 2000, 2001, 2002, I had heard that they were exploring, they found some antidepressant effects of ketamine in the hospice, or somebody was getting it for some kind of intervention, and then they felt this lift. So I'd heard about it, and I remember hearing that when in medical school, that you as an ER doctor, where you use it for this dissociative anesthesia effect to do certain procedures on people, that through my journey, that maybe that dosing is different, but that once in a while you might run into somebody that had some kind of journey experience, and you just tell them, oh, don't worry, it's just the ketamine. Don't let it go. Or if it was the children, it was just like a dream. So I knew about that. I didn't know that much about it. And then I got invited to be on the board of Prati Group, which is a nonprofit in Colorado. And they wanted to have a diverse board. And they asked me, with my ayahuasca, all that experience, if I would want to be on the board. And then to be on the board, they said, you get the free training. You can go through the ketamine training. And I had already been through the MAPS MDMA training through another speaking opportunity or whatever. They invited me to that. So I went through it. I went through the weekend training, and I saw what happened with everybody at the retreat. And I was like, whoa, this is really interesting. And just talking to the people working there and getting exposed to the work they're doing with patients and seeing that they're really, these guys, again, back to the same thing. These are the MDMA MAPS therapists. They have this evidence-based track record. They're really turning people around with PTSD in ways that nobody has. And these guys are saying, this is working for us with ketamine too. So that legitimacy based on their track record was like very intriguing to me. And then seeing what they could do. And I had the experience of myself on ketamine in the training of seeing how, yes, it's like this big opening. And then from my ceremonial experience, I just felt it's a big opening. And that I thought from my whatever training in Peru and everything, I thought, hey, if you brought a certain amount of spiritual structure to this, you could probably do some of the same things. And so then somewhere along the lines, then we were trying to come up with here in Arizona, coming up with some kind of group retreat that we wanted to work on with Native Americans. And we were trying to come up with a protocol that would be more culturally oriented, maybe bringing medicine people in, or maybe we're going to chat during the effects of the medicine. And we were just thinking about that. And we had talked to a retreat center. Yeah, we're putting together with my community here. And then Naropa University, who I have friends that were working there. And they said, we want our students to have an experience. And would you put together some kind of retreat with ketamine, but like with ceremonial, cultural kind of aspects that would suit this community? So then we did that. That was the first time that I think that was the first time that I sat with somebody on ketamine. But it wasn't just me. We had a nurse practitioner who was running a clinic where they're using ketamine. So she was the provider. So she's the experienced one. And then I'm there to sing and support the people through the process. Yeah.
And yeah, that's really cool, Joe, because experientially you have had the ayahuasca non-ordinary states of consciousness plus the ketamine non-ordinary states of consciousness. What are some of the differences that you've noticed in the non-ordinary state of consciousness?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, sure, there's differences. I would like to start by saying some of the similarities that I just had a indigenous Colombian healer, my very close and dear colleague from Colombia, who was visiting, and she had never done any kind of synthetic psychedelic ever in her life. She's about 36, and she's hardcore plant medicine from the tradition, a very natural person. And so she wanted to try it. She wanted to try ketamine. I brought her into one of the clinics in Phoenix that they wanted to invite her to have an experience and to hear her response. She felt if you hold it the right way, which she felt like they were doing for her, that it took her to the same access. She said, this is the same access. That's what she found. That's what she expressed. She said, wow, if you hold this the right way, this is the kind of medicine that can open this portal to this access for which you can then work in an interesting way that's, I don't know how to describe it, non-ordinary. It's one way to describe it, right? So that being said, what's different about it? Yeah, they have different flavors. They have different experiences on your conscious mind. I think with something like ayahuasca, it's much more common to feel the presence of the spirit of the medicine itself. Like that would be a guiding presence for not everybody, but for many people, that they report that. So that's different. There's a much more physical ayahuasca. There's a focus on the physical cleansing properties of it that can help you cleanse, that you would with purging, whether it's vomiting or diarrhea or something like that. It's potentially more intense, potentially more challenging. With ketamine, although some people can get pushed into a similar kind of intensity, oftentimes it calms the fear response more than some of the other things. So it can be very gentle on people in many circumstances. And then there's a whole other slew of things, like as far as medications that you have to worry about or not worry about, and contraindications. So I think that it's different. But I actually had a therapeutic ketamine session not that long ago. And yeah, I got a lot out of it. Like it was a major experience for me. I already had 2 as part of the training, but it had been a while. Now I'm leading all these people. I wanted to go back and see. And I just I felt a little bit like Sochi, like there at some level, of course, it's different flavor, the kind of molecular kind of vibe and feel of it versus the way the plants feel. But I do think that it provides an access that you can work with. That's the most important point. So it's like you don't have to do, just like you getting made fun of by the year, then I get the plant community. Oh my God, what are you doing? How could you do ketamine? Blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. I respect some of their concerns. But my point was, once again, hey, there's a lot of people that need help. And ayahuasca and that kind of approach, or these different kinds of, whether it's through spiritual practice or however it's being presented to people, there's a lot more people that need help. And so we need to have diverse options to help the people. And this is an option that is helping people. It comes with its own series of problems. There's addictive issues, and you got to worry about that kind of stuff. And it's something to bring up. But it's an amazing avenue. And it's so interesting because while the psychedelic therapy, the psychedelic renaissance is trying to figure out what's next, these ketamine clinics are popping up all over the place. So this non-ordinary states and their role and people's healing is already like happening. Oh, when is it going to be legal? It's like, actually, if you want to really get into this, it is happening right now. So that's interesting because that's normalizing the psychedelic therapy or non-ordinary therapy.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point about the similarity about being able to find that access point. And what's coming up for me is that access point might actually be the spirit as a possibility. And spirituality is not something we talk about in modern, traditional allopathic medicine. But I do think it is an important point. And I know spirituality is really important. Like you have your podcast, I believe it's called Modern Spirit.
That's right. Yep.
And so maybe that these medicines are the access point is that spirituality, because part of my practice here in Palm Springs is the spiritual. I call it the biopsychosocial spiritual model of medicine. So
yes.
Tell us about your thoughts on spirituality. And
I'm glad you bring it up. And so I like to walk my way to that topic. And we know that people have similarly, like whether it's the stigma against this or the stigma against that people have, there's some resistance. There's some about religious trauma, or they have a belief system, or they would prefer not to bring that element in. But as you said, this biopsycho spiritual model. So as we're trying to help people heal, and we realize, there's a biological dimension to their healing that we need to address. And then it turns out, there's a psychological. If we don't address the psychological, then we're in denial. You can't just fix it with pills alone. That's a fact, actually. If you're really serious about helping somebody who you care about, you're going to run into this. Similarly, the social aspect and the emotional aspect of their lives turns out to play a huge role. We're learning more and more about the role of trauma and adverse childhood experiences and the evidence that's just like strengthening the show people's emotional well-being, which is largely subjectively evaluated. Anxiety scale, depression scale, PTSD scale. It's like you ask them, how do they feel? And they tell you. And that you can clinically correlate that to some of the psychological stuff and to some of the biological stuff. These things are happening in a network with each other. And so then we have this other element, which is the mystical, or we say the non-ordinary, or we could say the spiritual. Again, it's like a semantic discussion as to what people feel comfortable with. What we're talking about is that there's another dimension here to address, and that if we don't address it, it doesn't make it go away. You can deny that there's some element here, but the evidence keeps pointing to its existence. So then you have the recent research from Emory University, where they published from their divinity school trying to study psychedelic therapies, and saying they came up with this term, the CERT, spiritual, existential, religious, theological experience, the CERT. They said certs are very common in psychedelic assisted therapies. This is like a widely reported phenomenon, which was also backed up by the previous work with the psilocybin research at Johns Hopkins, that people are having mystical experiences. They're having non-ordinary experiences. Many of them would describe this as spiritual. At the very least, what does that mean in secular terms? What they say that it's deeply personally meaningful. And then if you ask them if they would say it's spiritually significant, subjectively, they report yes, in large numbers and like a high percentage. So then now this is getting exposed. Here's this thing that's there, the elephant in the room, this spirituality that has also been a major element of human history and human experience and human culture. This relationship with the mystery and the mystical and that which exists beyond space and time, and that which exists beyond birth, beyond death, that is omnipresent. That the physics, our physics and our quantum physics keeps exploring the mystical properties of matter. The matter itself is showing transcendent properties that don't follow all the rules, that occasionally break out of the dimensions that we consider ordinary into non-ordinary spaces. And that this is also established, evident fact. This is true. That the material world exists in some kind of continuum with higher dimensions that exist beyond the ordinary dimensions. You could say that's true. And the reason I bring it up is because quantum entanglement is a strange property in quantum physics. I don't claim to understand it all. What I understand has something to do with if you entangle these two photons, that they can now communicate their state to each other at a distance that would require them to be able to communicate faster than the speed of light. That they are doing it in a way that transcends the space in between them. And that this is an actual property of matter and photons and subatomic particles that's described and that's actually utilized in the development of quantum processors that are helping amplify the processing speed that allows for things like artificial intelligence to start to take hold and take shape. So then we're starting to get how this connects back to the healthcare thing. It turns out these are essential, things that are actually vital. They're actually vital to how things work. They directly participate. And in the case of psychedelic therapies and certs, so they say, yeah, the cert is very common. And the next line in the research paper is, and it turns out they're clinically relevant. Just as we noticed the biological dimension was relevant to the outcome of the person's healthcare trajectory, and the psychological was also relevant, and the social and the emotional was relevant, their relationship to the mystery is relevant to them getting better. And so this was our friend in Colorado, Dr. Adele France, she did a research project where they were exploring, let's look across the board. Let's say, is it MDMA? Is it ketamine? Is it psilocybin? What's the best? So let's look at people who went through psychedelic therapies, and let's broaden the disease spectrum. We'll say, they went for anxiety, they went for depression, they went for eating disorder. And yeah, a lot of them got better. If we do all these statistical questionnaires and ask them who got better, what was the link across, depending on different substances, different disease process, apparently there's emotional trauma underneath that needs to be addressed. And in these cases, or at least that was a factor of their healing. Turns out from a statistical analysis, they said what happened was the ones who got better, we could say that they all had shifts in emotional processing. Their emotional processing was different. And so that has subjective dimension to it. That also has a biological dimension to it, the nervous system regulation, the triggering and the parasympathetic, sympathetic function. You could say they're not pushed into fight or flight the way they would have been. They're able to process and deal with stuff without getting drawn into some past trauma or reacting in some conditioned way. They have a little more spaciousness which would speak to some kind of more versatility, more resilience in their nervous system, you could say. You could go as far to say that, their emotional function. And so then what about that? What can we say about the emotional processing? What was driving that? Did everyone that got better, they all had shifts in emotional processing? What about everybody that had shifts in emotional processing? What did they all have in common? And they showed that it was a shift in spiritual well-being, according to the data that they collected. And so then this connection, this access, this mystical, non-ordinary access seems to provide a very interesting resource to allow for this emotional processing change. That's what we're seeing. The spirituality. What is the function? Why would we want to bring about it? Why should we talk about it? Is it okay to talk about it? Spirituality, however we find the right way to talk about it that people aren't so set off, is like, what is the practical purpose, of that? And it's for your health and being, and it's to help you be in alignment with this mystical dimension of reality. And that there's a two-way street, because there's something there. There's some kind of invisible landscape that we're dealing with, we're navigating with each other and in our daily lives. And also that there's something to draw from there. That in aligning ourselves with that there is some kind of energy that is providing some kind of versatility, when we're connected into that, whether it's a coincidence, whether it's just biochemical, but there's like this neuroplasticity that we see going along that. When there's other ways to achieve it, sure, I'm not saying there isn't. But when these people have these very aligned experiences and feel very spiritually significant, they also do feel, and there is even evidence in the neuroscience, that there's some energetic thing happening in the physiology that goes along with that. And along with that is this biochemical stuff of this neuroplasticity. So that's a very interesting question that I'm exploring right now. That's what I'm trying to talk about or read about, is that interface of the metaphysics of this spiritual connection of incorporating the spiritual dimension into our biopsychosocial spiritual model, that it's not just a concept, but that it's has implications to things like neuroplasticity.
It's beautifully stated, Joe. I feel, and I believe this is the topic of your next book that's coming out.
That's correct. Sam is smarter than me. That's what I like about him. Yes.
And so the title is, do you have a working title?
Yeah, I guess it's time. You deserve it. You deserve it, Sam.
Okay.
Now, what it is, it's still in the works. It's still in the early stages. I'm only on chapter 9 of 12, but it's all mapped out and I have a goal. And chapter 9 is about being down at Niue Rao, okay? And doing a diet and having one of these the most downloaded. I'm not that person that always has downloads, but this time I did. And it was taking me to that. It was through dreams during the diet. Okay, so dreams being another window into this non-ordinary realm. Are dreams just emotional processing? And just maybe sometimes they are. Do people have non-ordinary experiences in dreams? That's extremely common, widely reported. Whether you believe it or you don't believe it, but there it is. And so in that, I was receiving this message about showing me exactly what I just talked to you about. They were showing me that, okay, Joe, you've talked about this and you had your other book and you lectured about this and you brought them right to this point of where it's, as you may be aware, and it's becoming a bigger theme in psychedelic therapies, connectedness. The connectedness scale is like the new scale of like, actually, if you want to see if it worked, you can tell it worked means they have improved health, mental health, basically biopsychosocial, spiritual. Like you're going to need to see an improvement in those arenas to declare that it worked. And the ones that I worked on, we can predict that by showing you who scored higher on the connectedness scale after the intervention. Connectedness to self, connectedness to the body, connectedness to others, to the universe. through a series of simple questions that this would be linked. So then it brings us back to this mystery connected to what? I guess to self, but the connected to the interconnectedness of all things was at some point shows itself to be part of that flow where the circuits open, and then we can now reorient and realign ourselves to that, to the possibility of how it all could be in flow. It could somehow function. We could. Something I thought I could never integrate in my life. Now all of a sudden, with this kind of open realm of possibility, I could see how that could still make its way into it, be acceptable, and still be able to move through and thrive in the face of something that I thought was totally unacceptable, as an example, like in the subjective experience. So there's something about what are we aligning with, what are we connected to, and there's a metaphysical thing there, and I think there's an energetic thing. I think there's a thermodynamic thing to explore that's there for the Robin Card Harris. One of their big research areas is brain entropy. This shift in brain entropy when the default mode network, this thermodynamic shift is what they're studying. Energetic shift and the way the brain is functioning. Okay, when you see the LSD and you see all the circuits light up, like all of them together, it's like, okay, so is that blood flow? Is it because you got all the arteries open up to all the circuits? Like, how come all the circuits are lighting up? What are they tuning into? What is that? What's on the other side of that? So it's along those lines. So that connection is part of this. That has utility. That it could be disturbed or some could be wrong, could hurt you, but that there's a useful thing. So then I got to add one more thing. So Bill Richards, I've been repeating this all the time, and this is from How Did You Change Your Mind from Michael Pollan, the big psychedelic psychotherapist. Bill Richards, his line there is, hey, you know what? If you keep exploring consciousness and you keep pushing the bounds and giving people psychedelics or dropping ketamine clinics into your city, it's like you will bump into the sacred. Like it's going to happen, and it's not something that I'm telling you that's like you're going to planting the idea, and it's there waiting for you to find it. And that'll happen to believers and non-believers. That was his experience, watching people go through these experiences. So then it speaks to this sacred element that's there, that exists. And so then there's many cultures that are focused on helping people reconnect to the sacred through ceremony, through practice, through spiritual practice, all different kinds of spiritual practice that would help them increase their resiliency and their vitality to do that well. But then that's why the indigenous traditions, the Native American traditions, that this, like, it could be a song, it could be a story, it could be a ceremony, it could be a ritual, it could be a therapy interaction, it could be a meditation, it could be an experience at a ketamine clinic. But to me, it's important to share once again, like how simple it could be. And that's why the Native people talk about these things as medicine for their spiritual value and helping address the holistic person, the biopsychosocial spiritual. And maybe this one is heavier on the spiritual side. That's why we're using it to touch you there. But that may impact the other dimensions. It might impact the bio and the psycho and the social if I go at it that way. So that for us, it's okay to call it medicine. It's not, we don't have to, the traditional way to refer to that is medicine. In the indigenous cultures, at least here in the Americas, I don't know, and probably in many other parts of the world. So that way, prayer is medicine, all those things. And so the book is about, and it's still taking shape and it's still got a ways to go, a series of stories of when the spiritual hit my life in a way that that I had to integrate it, or I felt like I had to, and I couldn't just ignore it. It was too impactful what happened to me. And so then that kind of opened up more and more curiosity and interest in relating to the mystery, which I think I guess that's how I would describe what spirituality is, like our relationship to the mystery. And so it's a series of stories that are about my relationship to spirituality. Then in that sense, it's a series of medicine stories. And so the book is called Medicine and Song.
And now a quick word for our aspiring ketamine clinic founders out there. If you've tuned into our episode today, chances are you're curious about the ins and outs of starting up a ketamine clinic. It's an exciting field, but let's face it, the journey from idea to actually opening day can be quite daunting. That's why we've created something special for you. Think of it as your personal roadmap, a free downloadable checklist that lays out the essential steps you need to consider when starting up your own ketamine clinic. This checklist is designed to help you avoid common pitfalls and launch your trajectory to success. So how can you get your hands on this checklist? Simple. Just visit www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist and grab your free copy today. We've made it easy and accessible because we believe in supporting our community with valuable resources. KetamineStartup.com/checklist. All right, let's get back to our discussion. Stay tuned and don't forget to download your free checklist during or after the podcast. Medicine Song, that is a beautiful title, and I'm so excited to read it, Joe. And I want to go back and touch upon this connectedness, because as you were speaking about that, I was listening to another podcast and I learned about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure we're familiar with and you may have heard of it. Classically, it's that pyramid with basic needs, emotional needs, social needs, and then the top, according to the pyramid, is that self-actualization point. But the new learning that I had about it is Abraham Maslow, during his latter years, he said, no, actually, it's not self-actualization. That is not the final goal. He actually said in his later publications, there's one goal beyond that, or another level. And you may already be familiar with this, but he said it's self-transcendence. So to go beyond oneself. And to me, that talks about the importance of connection. It's not just about me, but actually this interconnectedness, this interwoven nature of reality that we're in, and the crucial aspect of how that can be therapeutic.
Yeah, that's it. That's the bottom line, is that it can be therapeutic to. And first, that in the pyramid, it's okay, you're dealing with something that exists. These are described, okay, you have to take care of the food. You have to take care of the shelter. You have to take care of your emotional needs. You have to take care of this. You have to take care of that. And then eventually, the point of the pyramid is you may struggle to, what I understood the point of the pyramid is like, oh, you might struggle to deal with this issue if that's still an issue. If they're starving, they don't want to worry about achieving their whatever emotional goals or this other stuff. So you have to get all these things in place, or that was the idea, in order to reach these higher potential things that you could improve or somehow come into harmony with. And one of them would be that eventually you have to get past yourself, because you are past yourself. It's like, that's the other, like this, that's also there waiting for you to deal with, that you are part of a non-ordinary reality at some level. And that's important because there's a lot of perspectives there, because it's apparently true, first of all. And so we have to deal with it at some level. And then that is what people end up dealing with. It's like in the movie that made me feel like what I felt like when I was on ketamine was everything everywhere all at once. I saw that. I was like, whoa, these guys, I thought for sure they had done ketamine, just because it really took me to that, like the center of the multiverse, of seeing like all these other versions of this soul journey, like core experience that I seem to be living. And so how to get all the way down to, what's the point of life? Why are we doing any of this? Nothing matters. Everything, just all these questions about existential questions about existence. And versus just bringing it like to another framework, like here in Arizona and working with Navajo people and their philosophy, and whether that you could be related more to other cultures. That is, like Hojo is like to this, they have a way of describing it, to walk in beauty, that you want to come into that kind of awareness, that you are aware of all these levels, and including with the natural world, with nature, the ecosystem, also participating in thatness. And that you, in doing that that you have a chance at a kind of a more enlightened existence. You have a chance of living without the kind of ignorance that you're going to later grieve. This ignorance that we carry, whether you, like I said, they tell you, hey, you're stupid for doing a ketamine clinic. And then they'll allow you to eat his words later. It's, oh, I shouldn't have said that to you, versus being in that kind of consciousness where you're able to make moves that are healthy. And when I say healthy, like that's the beauty of the modern scientific world, the biopsychosocial, spiritual. Well, we now have all the physical measures. We have a pretty good idea of understanding when somebody's body is working in a way that wouldn't require added support. Similarly, the psychology, we have some idea, ways of asking people, did their depression get better? Did their anxiety get better? Emotional processing and emotional regulation, like this is a field that we can get it. And people's social relationships, how's it going there? Their relationships. And then now spiritual well-being, being an area that's academically published as a validated measure of showing, hey, so now we can say, are you in alignment? Is your practice, is the lifestyle, is what you're teaching and preaching? So how are we doing on those 4 levels, the biopsychosocial, spiritual? Let's check. This guy tells me ketamine's not important. That's just you shouldn't have it in the clinic. You shouldn't make it available for people. And he has his mentality and he has his patient population. Well, let's see, how are they all doing? And the stability was we've decided to allow the ketamine to function within our healthcare system for these reasons, to help these people. And we can just take a look. How's this population doing? How's this one doing? Like maybe no one's right or wrong, but maybe we should reevaluate. Maybe that position be worth checking. If the ketamine is running haywire and people are getting addicted and causing all these problems, and okay, we'll have to deal with that too. But let's look, is it overall, is it that's not really the major issue and things are really getting a lot better and the trauma load is decreasing, then let that be our guide. Let health be our guide. And so spirituality, that's the last piece in the indigenous traditions here, I would say in the Shipibo tradition, and I would say in the Navajo tradition that I've been exposed to, health and spirituality are regarded to be the same thing because it's a holistic assessment of your harmonious relationship with yourself, with your loved ones, with your society, with your ecosystem, and with the universe.
So let's get down to the nuts and bolts, Joe, because let's say there is someone listening and they're like, wow, Joe and Sam, they're out there talking about quantum physics. And I'm just entering the space. I'm novel, brand new, I'm de novo, and I'm curious. What advice would you give to someone who is considering opening up a ketamine clinic? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say that you want to be everything we're saying. So there's all this enthusiasm and it's interesting. And of course there was an element of, somebody brought it up to me the other day. I was on another Zoom podcast type of thing. And the guy was asking me about being an ayahuasquero, like working in the ceremony and the Shipibo tradition. And so he said, if you're opening those spaces and places and you're doing that kind of thing, don't you think that comes with a certain sacred responsibility? So yeah, traditionally, yes, that is, not everyone necessarily carries that. Not everyone lives up to that. But there is. So I think there is a big responsibility to try to do it well, to do it right, because you're talking about opening people up to the high level of vulnerability. That's so why the resistance around opening these states, in general, because it's through our vulnerability that we are able to access these things. And so it's very vulnerable. And so you're bringing people into that vulnerability, and that's vulnerable. And so there's a big responsibility around people's safety, being responsible, being confidential, taking care of their vulnerability in a way that really respects that. And then the other advice, without I would go all these extremes with the quantum physics and stuff, to talk just to explore this beyond the materialism, beyond the materialistic kind of perspective. But that there is going to be a sacred element that is going to enter their field, that they could say, no, I don't want to be involved in anything spiritual. This is just medical practice. Although, as we're learning, they're just entwined in this biopsychosocial spiritual. It's always there. But it's gonna happen. You're gonna have, if you have a clinic like that and you think, oh, this is basically McDonald's and we just offer the same thing to everybody, and don't worry, it's just as long as we deal with the customers, that it'll all be the same across the board. But it's somebody in one of the rooms is gonna, once in a while, it's gonna have an out-of-body experience. Somebody in another room, once in a while, it might talk to a deceased loved one. Somebody in the other room is going to have this cert. These certs are going to happen from time to time. And so you're going to have to feel that a little bit. So just to open yourself to that. And that the last piece is that as all that's going on, to help people through those states, there's no question that it's very helpful to have personal experience with that to some degree, so that you would, to help to be able to be there for somebody through that, to have an idea that you would have some experience with the non-ordinary, and be open to that for yourself, because you may have to go into some vulnerable places with somebody else that is going to take you into your own vulnerability. So having experience with that with yourself and being supported through that, so that you can support people through that. I don't know. Those are some thoughts that I have.
Yeah, I love it. And these are really powerful medicines. And I think it was Spider-Man who once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So
it was actually Spider-Man's uncle, I believe, or his.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. But yeah, the sacred responsibility, being able to be cognizant and conscious of that, the various experiences that people can have. I've even seen near-death experiences, which we didn't get into that much, but there was a study looking at ketamine, ayahuasca, LSD, DMT, psilocybin, et cetera. They looked at all these reports of patients, and they found that ketamine was one of the most likely substances to create these NDEs, near-death experiences. People need to be cognizant that this can happen, and because it's there, and they may touch upon it and bump upon it, and to be really aware and conscious of the possibilities that can occur.
And that it can be helpful. They're starting to, here in Phoenix, they're starting to, maybe for the reason you're just talking about, but all the end-of-life anxiety research that they were doing in psilocybin, they're saying, hey, why don't we start using ketamine in the hospice? And so they're doing that here. I mentioned they were doing it before, but now they're really doing like psychedelic dosing to help people, and the way they're doing it with end-of-life anxiety and psilocybin. But
yeah. This has been a beautiful conversation. I do have a few fun questions to shift gears. And the first one for you is, do you have a hidden talent or hobby that most people would be surprised to learn about?
I think that I don't do it in one. I've always wanted to go back to it. It was actually a ketamine retreat that kind of reopened it for me again. Was when I was a child, I used to draw a lot, like very interested in visual art and drawing and painting, colors, all that stuff. And I want to do more of that again. But that's when I was a child, I was very dedicated to that. Yes.
Awesome. And let's say that you could travel back in time for one day. Where and when would you go, and why?
That's a great question. I think I'd probably go to something like the La Brea tar pits. I don't know, I'm just fascinated by prehistoric creatures for some reason. I like to get drawn into those YouTubes just to see these saber-toothed woolly mammoth. I don't know. I think I would like to see that. Something like that, like Jurassic Park type of thing.
And another question for you, Joe, is if you couldn't do what you're doing, being a doctor, let's say, and basically in a way a shaman and a master in this space, let's say you couldn't do what you're doing now, but you had to pick some career or something, what would you do instead?
Something like ocean related, something like chill out, snorkeling instructor or scuba dive instructor or like surfing rental guy, something like that. Yeah.
I would not have expected that. That's awesome.
Really? Yeah, I really like the water, and I'm missing out on that. I feel like I wish I was doing more of that.
And another question, what's something that you purchased in the last year for, I don't know, $100 or less that's been like, wow, I really should have gotten that sooner?
I've gotten this. I don't know if this is the greatest answer, but I've gotten it before, which is to pass into the Grand Canyon, just to pass to go to the Grand Canyon. And here in Arizona, the Grand Canyon is a very magical place. It's amazing. It's always very inspirational. It's just been a while since I got a pass and went to the Grand Canyon, but this year I went because someone was visiting.
Last question for you, Joe.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say that, I don't know, you could give yourself advice to the 18-year-old version of Job. So this is, let's say he just graduated high school, is about to embark and wherever he's going to go. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Because it's like people used to tell me like, oh, you need a 5-year plan, or you need this plan, or you need that plan. But for me, I would never have imagined that I would be doing this with you at that point in my life. I don't know that I would. I had no way of knowing that, even though it makes sense and I'm into all this stuff, mystical stuff always, but that it would be realized this way. I really could not see it coming. And so I just would say, don't worry about it. Just do it. Follow your heart. Follow your heart.
That's awesome. Follow your heart. That's a beautiful way to end. And for our listeners and viewers who are curious to learn more about you, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, they should. We have Modern Spirit, our nonprofit that's running retreats and different workshops and classes, is available. modernspirit.org is the website. You can also connect to drjoetafur.com, and there's a newsletter that we put out. And so that's just those two sites. I think you could learn about what we're doing, what I'm doing.
Thank you, Joe. And is there any other final thoughts or comments or any other last words you want to share with us before we wrap up?
No, it's just an honor to be here with you, Sam. It's really a pleasure. I love how you go about things. I love how you tackle things, and including the podcast business. I did a little podcasting myself, but it's just very well done, Sam. So it's a pleasure to be part of it.
Thank you so much. That means so much coming from you, and I really appreciate your time.